Hi, Brandon. Thank
Hello,
you
how
for.
are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
Thank you for joining me for our Meet the Artist interview series. You
Thank
are
you very much for
Smuin's
having me.
newest company member, so I'm
Yeah,
very excited. It's been fun to read everyone's bios as part of this. It's baffling how many paths there are to a career, let alone to Smuin. So it's pretty
and
interesting.
how many of those paths end up like intertwining without you even really realizing it until a few years later when you realize that you know a group of the same people.
Yeah. So, first question, how old were you when you started taking ballet and what got you into it?
I started taking ballet when I was 11 years old, and from what I remember, it was a way for my mom to keep me and my little sister busy at the same time because she started going to a gym and a relative recommended that she put us in dance classes at the gym because there was a teacher there. So that way could be kept busy while she was working out and she didn't have to worry about where we were or what we were doing.
So, at what point did you decide you wanted to do this more seriously?
I feel like from what I remember, it was just sort of like a gradual thing. And as you get older, you see more sides of the career and of what it actually means to be a dancer.
Hmm.
Because after a year with that teacher, I don't know what the conversation was or how it happened, but I ended up auditioning for the Houston Ballet Academy. And so that's where I saw that, like, there were professional companies and that you do performances and that it's a full time job because we would be getting there in the afternoon after school. And the company and some of the older students had been there all day rehearsing and taking classes, stuff like that. So I don't remember a particular moment of being like, this is what I want to do. I think it was a gradual sort of appreciation of the art form and wanting to do it more seriously once I realized that it was a thing.
So, you were at the Houston Ballet Academy, which is a pretty well known school in the
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
And did you get to interact at all with Ben Stevenson while you were there?
um,
Or
a
was he just
bit.
sort of like a mythical figure in the company?
No, we always saw him and
Okay.
he was always really nice and really sweet to the students. But as a younger student, especially as a guy, you're really only ever involved in Nutcracker. I interacted with him a bit when I started doing Nutcracker performances, but after like 1 or 2 years, it's when he changed companies and then the director changed.
Well, then I guess I should ask, did you work with Stanton Welch?
I worked with Stanton a lot more because especially as you're in the second company, they you start to do his ballets
Which are
and
hard.
which are very hard. And so you're doing, his ballets and you learn them from a teacher that you already have, like the head of the second company. And then he will come in towards the end.
Was that scary? I worked with him at one summer program and I just remember being terrified the entire time.
I mean, I could definitely see that because he is very demanding and very specific. And so I don't know if I was ever necessarily scared or found it scary. You do find it a bit nerve wracking because it's just like, you know, you're working with the person that created this ballet and also the person that is the head of the organization that you're trying to be a part of.
Right.
But I was lucky in the way that I think I just tried to do what he wanted. So therefore working with him was fairly easy for me in that sense of like being afraid because
Right.
you can't let the fear block what you're able to do. So you just have to focus in and just try your best. And I think that he always appreciated that, or still appreciates that in people that he works with.
So you did Houston Ballet too,
Hmm.
and then you went on to the Joffrey Ballet,
Yes, I did.
which is in Chicago. So it's a bit different city, I guess,
Yes.
than Houston. But the Joffrey Ballet, just like Houston, has such a phenomenal reputation. So
Hmm.
must have been a great starting place sort of for your full-time professional career.
Yeah, I mean, I still have friends that I worked with there to this day. And it was funny because this morning for class, we had Julianne, who was a dancer there my first year there.
That's right.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a great experience because, like I said, I made some friends that I think that I'll have for the rest of my life and got to live in an amazing city for 2 years. And I was an apprentice, so we got that great in between of being a full-time company member, but still kind of having someone that has their eyes on us so that we don't get lost in the shuffle of what it's like to have to learn a few different parts in different productions at the same time and performing consistently and like starting to become responsible for yourself both as a dancer and as an adult.
That's key. What would you say? I've had this conversation with a few people now. The difference, because it's always different, the difference in your experience of a second company and an apprentice.
For us in HV2, we knew that we were still technically students, but we were the step before you would get your apprenticeship into the company if you got one. And so we performed a bit and just learned what it was like to be a professional. Like, we learned how to read a schedule, and we had half our day was classes, the other half was rehearsals, and like how to pick up choreography. And then there were times where we did have to work with the company, and that would be fit into our schedule. And so once I became an apprentice with Joffrey, first of all, you're getting paid and
Yes.
living on your own and living on your own and trying to become responsible and not, make too many mistakes. But I feel like the main difference for me was just, I don't know, it's like, yeah, that in between, it felt like a very gradual in between before you get a full company position or before you're lucky enough to get a full company position.
Okay. Sounds about right. Sounds about in keeping with what
Yeah,
everybody said.
yeah, because that part of it can get tricky and complicated depending on which organization you're a part of. But luckily, I was a part of two organizations that didn't they didn't take advantage of people the way that sometimes they can be taken advantage of now.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely shifted a lot, I feel like.
Yeah.
So from Joffrey, you went to Rochester City Ballet. How did you end up at Rochester from Joffrey? And again, another like big location shift. You do big location shifts. That's what I
I
got.
do. Yeah. Well, as an apprentice with Joffrey, it's a 2-year apprenticeship, and then after
Oh,
that, yeah.
2 years.
So after that is when they decide whether or not they will take you into the main company if there's a place for you. And I was during the shift of direction. So I was the last year, my first year was the last year of Gerald Arpino. And then the second year is when Ashley Weeder came in. In between my first and second year, I actually got my first and luckily only big injury.
Okay.
And so when Ashley was starting, I was still injured and starting to come back. And so around the time that that decision has to start being made, I still wasn't fully back yet. And so after that, I started auditioning around. And at the time, my best friend, who was from Rochester, was going back. And she told me, like, hey, they're looking for a boy. Like, some guys have auditioned and they haven't, like, seen anyone they like. You should audition. And so, long story short, I went to visit her, auditioned, got a contract, and then accepted it. And I started with them in the summer of 2008. Yeah.
Okay. That's very cool. So is that just like a small regional company?
Yes, it is a company that at that point had just started offering paid positions.
Okay.
And so, oddly enough, that year was also the year that Lauren Fisher was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
So, yeah, it's still a smaller company, has around the same amount of dancers as we have here. It's definitely opened up because before it used to be mostly dancers that trained from the school that were from Rochester that were a part of the company previously when they were in high school. And then once contracts came into play, they decided to stay and then were able to be paid for what they were already doing.
That's cool. It's always nice to hear
Yeah.
of what I feel like would probably be called a civic company, maybe, like making
Yeah.
transition to fully professional.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so this is what I think is interesting. I feel like a
Mhm.
lot of dancers in the US say it's easier to get a job in Europe,
Mhm.
or maybe that it's nicer to get a job in Europe.
Mhm.
But so many Americans think I'm going to try for Europe. But I feel like I've heard an equal number of European dancers talk about how it's easier to find a job in the States.
Mhm.
So is it just one of those like the grass is greener things, or
A bit, because there is just, yeah, you see, having been on both sides, I
yeah,
see both sides and what they're both saying.
okay,
Um, there are certain things about dancing in Europe that just don't happen here in America. There's, more support for it. You're paid the full year. You perform the whole year. And depending on where you are, because you have the government support, you can be a bit more experimental with the productions that you put out. So it's less about the money and it is more about the art and the performance of it. But in America, I feel like there's a bit more of a drive to produce good things because your company's well-being depends on it.
so what prompted you then now, so you've told me both sides, what prompted you to look to Europe after being at Rochester,
Um,
or
I
was it
think it's
just
just something that, no, I think it's something that I always knew that I wanted to do, that I always wanted to try working in a different country and just seeing what it was like. Because luckily in Houston, there's this massive festival that invites companies from all over the world. And seeing that there was this whole big world out there that I wasn't seeing on a daily basis, that I got to see, once a year for a couple of shows, intrigued me. And I just decided to, that was something that I would like to try.
so you ended up in Estonia. Now I looked
Yes.
at a map because my geography, especially outside of this country, is not great. And I was like, oh, okay, this is much further east and
Uh-huh.
way further north
Very far.
than I was
Yes.
thinking. So just like tell me about the Estonian experience because I'm fascinated.
The Estonian experience is, fun fact, me and my friends there used to call it Narnia. I mean, we still do, but it's because it just felt like we were kind of locked away in this little wardrobe for 10 months out of the year during the season. And then for 2 months, we're let out and unleashed into the wild. And no, it was very, like with everywhere else, I have friends there that I know that I will have for the rest of my life because the company was mostly foreigners. And so we spent all of our time with each other. So, and for those of us that weren't European, we spent lots of holidays together. And if people, went home for a weekend, knowing that we couldn't do that, we, spend Christmas, New Year's, like all those sorts of things together. And the I had to develop like the performing throughout the whole year sort of stamina,
Mm-hmm.
because usually when you go back for the beginning of the season, you will be working on a new premiere creation, something, for about 6 weeks. But then once the creation process is over, you may have 9 performances, but it'll be 9 performances from October to April.
Okay.
And then on top of that, you will be doing other productions like that. So you could have 3 shows in 1 week, but it would be 3 completely different shows.
So it's a lot of rep to have to retain all the time.
Yeah. Like you can't just learn it, perform it, let it go. You have to learn it, keep performing it, keep it in like the middle of your brain, and then a couple days before you get to refresh it into your body.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was it hard physically in that sense?
It could be, because especially if you were rehearsing something new, that was completely different. And then somewhere in that process, you have to do 2 to 3 shows of the rep from the beginning of the season. Like getting that back into your body when that's not the language that you've been working in could sometimes be a bit tricky. And you just have to trust that even if the rehearsal wasn't the best, that once you get on stage that you know, your body knows what to do.
Is there a large audience for ballet in Estonia?
Yes, because especially if it's a production that they know and recognize, they flock to it. Or if it's something that, you know, gets a good review and then they end up liking it. People have come back to shows, have said that, you know, they go back to a show 7 or 8 times because they just enjoy it so much. And then they bring friends with them, and then those friends bring friends, and those friends bring friends. And so it's definitely more embedded in the culture to have an evening, you know, with the family, or have it be a date night, and then you go have dinner, and then you go see a show of some sort. It may not be ballet, it could be a musical, it could be a play, it could be something like that. But I mean, it's kind of the same here, where the audience was a bit older, but not for all the productions. So younger people were starting to get into it.
Okay. And then was this company more of a touring company, or did you pretty much just stay at the one theater that was your home base?
We did a bit of touring. We usually toured throughout the Baltics. And so we would, at least once a year, go to Latvia, or one time we went to Lithuania. I think about 5 years ago, we went to, or a small group of us went to Canada to be a part of a festival. So a bit of touring, not too much major touring, but a bit.
A bit. So how long were you there?
I was there for 6 years.
6 years? That's a long time.
Yeah.
To be cold.
To be cold, yeah. I learned the art of layering.
Did they have a summer? Like, does it get warm?
Yeah, it got very warm during the summer.
Okay. So then from there, you went to Germany to Ballet Hagen.
Yeah. Yes.
And what did you decide? Did you want to leave Estonia? Or
yeah.
Okay.
I guess I had just been there for a while, and
yeah,
as you get older, you kind of start to wonder what else is out there. You wonder, you know, can I see myself living in this place after I'm done dancing? Like, all those things were kind of a question. And so I have a friend, a very good friend of mine, that is also in Hagen right now. She's still there. And I messaged her one day and was just like, you know, are you looking for any guys? And she was like, yes, actually. So yeah, I went there, had a very short and quick audition day, and then got that job. Luckily, I found it a few weeks later, but I think that was my most interesting audition.
Oh yeah. Well, was that
just
short?
Because it was so short. Short as in like, I think I had like a 45-minute class, 20 minutes of learning some sort of rep, speaking to the director, and then having to go to the airport.
So how did your experience in Germany compare with Estonia? Was it a similar like year-round schedule?
Yeah, that was all very similar. The rep was slightly different in some ways, which was good.
Yeah.
But yeah, the overall structure was around the same.
And then I guess I'll ask the same question. Was there a large audience for ballet? there?
Um, Not as large, just because I was in a smaller town.
Okay.
I was in a smaller town and there were bigger cities very close by. So some people would sometimes go to those bigger cities, but then also at the same time, there were people that supported our company that supported pretty much every company in the region. So if there was a performance, then they would go to like the 3 to 4 ballet companies that were in the region and were supportive of all of them and like knew the dancers, knew what was going on and all that kind of stuff. Would like watch us warm up before performances and yeah. So I would say because there's more options, sometimes there was a bit less support.
So how long were you in Ballet Hagen? Hagen. Ballet Hagen.
I was there. I was there for 2 years.
2 years. Okay. And so now here we
Yeah.
are, middle of a pandemic, and you decided to find a new job. I love it. That seems to take guts. Was the audition experience different? Because I feel like given that you had been in Germany auditioning for a company in the States, you probably would have been doing it not virtually, but you would have been sending materials anyway.
I did have to send materials anyway, and I got very lucky with the timing because I made it to San Francisco for the audition about a week before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So why Smuin?
I have known several dancers that have been in this company, and it was just somewhere that I had, heard about, known about. I would see things every once in a while, be like, oh, that looks really cool. And then, yeah, I just decided to send my stuff, and I knew that there was a certain quality that was here. I based the quality based of, videos that I had seen and dances that I had known, and thought that it would be something that would be really nice and cool to be a part of. And I've always loved San Francisco as a city.
Yeah.
And so I figured, why not give it a try? And I got very lucky and got one.
Is Smuin more contemporary than the other companies you've been in? Or
not really.
Okay.
Not in the sense of, because I feel like it's more contemporary ballet. Certain things, I mean, I'm sure that there are certain pieces that I haven't seen that are more contemporary, but
right.
The word contemporary means something very different in Europe.
Oh, okay.
Which it's just, not just starting to, but it's making its way over into America. But in Europe, it means something very different, and those sorts of companies just don't really exist on a permanent basis here.
I see. It's very interesting. Contemporary, it's so funny. I was just speaking with, who was it? Cassidy.
Yeah.
I was asking her to define contemporary ballet. And because we were just talking about how it's such a tricky thing to describe.
Yeah.
People have such a clear idea of what ballet is, but once you put the word contemporary in there, then suddenly it's like, oh, what does that really mean?
Well, contemporary ballet, I had someone like differentiate it for me once.
Okay.
Like contemporary ballet still uses ballet technique, but it's just a bit warped.
Okay, I like that. Warped, I think that's...
Whereas like not actual, I won't say actual, but whereas more contemporary things, it's just, if there's a hint of ballet technique in it, it's not the overall vision for that specific piece of choreography.
Okay, so first season with Smuin, obviously it's an unusual season everywhere.
Very.
But are there things despite that you're excited about?
And I'm excited about what's happening in spite of the situation. Because things are still happening, we're still creating things, still finding ways to put things out there to be able to perform for people. I'm in a very good pod of people, and just getting to know the company, even though, you know, people said, you know, it's a very strange introduction to Smuin. It's a strange introduction to any company in the world right now because nobody can operate on a full scale. So
Right.
I think that it's going to be good because you're going to be able to see what different people are capable of that you might not have otherwise been see because the structure has had to shift.
Is that something you'd like to see keep going?
I think so, because I think that even once, you know, live performance becomes a thing, again, who knows when that'll be, the digital content, I was reading an article that said that some numbers have lowered, but the demographic of who's watching the digital content and who's taking in the arts now has changed. And so there's always been this constant conversation of trying to get in younger audiences, more diverse audiences, and all that kind of stuff. Now it's happening because people can go on the internet, go on YouTube, and there will be something there that they may not have wanted to go pay to see that is just being offered to them. And so it's opening the eyes of the younger, more diverse audiences that people have been trying to get into theaters for years now. Also, in a way, there's less of a risk because if you pay money, you go to a show and you don't like it, then you feel obligated to sit there throughout the whole thing because you've paid for it and because you've left the house and because you're there.
Yeah.
Whereas now, you know, if you start to watch something and you don't like it, you can just find something else to watch. And then when we're able to be in the theater again, those people can, you know, take note of what they liked and who was performing it and see if there's something like that in their area, or, you know, if that company is coming near them. And yeah, I think it's interesting and I think it's good. Yeah, it's been a good doorway for a different type of audience.
So last question, we're pivoting back to ballet.
Okay.
Do you have, and you can look to the past or the future, or both.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite ballet you've danced or choreographer you've worked with, or a dream ballet to dance or choreographer to work with?
I mean, as far as like people that I would love to work with, I mean, I think that there's a long list of people that would love to work with David Dawson, just because he's incredible. Or I personally think that, you know, his ballets are incredible. And anytime I've watched something by him, you don't realize how much time has passed just because he constantly has your attention. And I think that as far as anything that I've danced, I think there's also just, I've enjoyed dancing different things because I have different memories attached to them. So it's the cliche of like, it's hard to pick a favorite because whatever you're working on at the time kind of becomes your favorite because it's the thing that you're the most focused on.
Okay, well, that's it. We're done. The end of the interview. Thank you.